All right. Thank you so much for joining me, Greg. I'm very excited to be meeting you and chatting to you.
Yeah, likewise.
Um, I basically reached out to you. I saw the podcast and interview that you did with Dylan sort of last week. And I mean, my partner and I have been doing CLA at our gym for about a year and a half now. Since we opened, we've been doing CLA. And our kids use CLA every day. And I was watching your podcast and I was like, oh my God, Blue's Clues. This guy gets it. Not like, obviously you get all of the stuff in terms of CLA, but I was like, no, he understands kids too. This guy's amazing. I have to come and talk to you now.
Yeah.
And that's why I reached out.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, and I just looked at your stuff too, and it's fantastic. I've seen a lot of people trying to get into the kid space with CLA and try to make it more kid friendly, and I think you're really hitting the mark.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that feedback.
You're
So I
welcome.
guess,
Yeah.
yeah, this whole thing is more just directed towards kids and towards CLA with kids as well. I've had quite a few people message me and they're like, I'd really love if you could talk to Greg because I've obviously the whole CLA thing. And I guess I just wanted to know what's your experience with teaching kids in CLA? Like, I know that you taught kids for a while there. I know you're not teaching them anymore. So I'd love to know how was that experience with kids?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I was back in 2006 actually when the very first time I ever taught kids was a blue belt training at a Lloyd Irvin affiliate school, and the owner there wanted to start a 5 to 7 year old program. So they didn't have one, and he was like, "Hey Greg, how would you like to start a 5 to 7 year old program?" I was like, "Well, I've never taught kids. I would love to do it. I think it'd be a I'm just a blue belt, but I think it'd be great to learn how to teach kids." And he's like, "Great, you start on Monday." And this conversation happened on Friday. And he was like, I've been building it for a while. I have about 20 kids and their parents coming in. It's going to be all your class. I panicked. I had
Yeah.
no idea what to do. I was like, oh my God. And of course, I'm cramming all weekend, reading everything I can about how to teach kids, how do kids learn, blah, 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 blah. And then it was like feet in the fire day one, like go out there and do your thing. And it was
Yeah.
a mess. But it did give me my initial opportunity to start engaging in teaching and learning how to do it. And
Yeah.
kids was the very first time that I learned how to learn or learned how to learn about teaching. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, and
Yeah,
I taught
absolutely.
kids from 2006 all the way until I got rid of my kids program in 2018.
I'd love to know why, but we'll get to that.
Sure.
But yeah, I think the number one thing that I've noticed is that the same thing. I mean, I'm still a blue belt, but the thing that I have noticed is that we have these programs, and a lot of the time, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu gyms are focused on the adults. But they're always like, kids is where the money's at. Kids is where, you pay the bills with your kids. But then no one was actually really caring about their kids program. And they were like, you were a blue belt, I was a blue belt. And there's nothing wrong with being a blue belt and coaching, but you're chucked in this environment and it's like, what the fuck do I do? How am I supposed to do this? Um, and that's terrifying because it is absolute chaos.
It truly is. So what I started doing when I first started, I would go to these Taekwondo schools since they ran kids programs since the 80s. They would run these seminars. You'd pay quite a big amount of money. You'd go to their seminars, and they would teach you how to organize a kids class. And that was the first time I ever learned about, how any type of sport organizes children. And within one of the meetings for Taekwondo specifically, I came across TGFU, Teaching Games for Understanding. And that was my first like game style approach at trying to adopt training for children. And that was what I first used to start running my kids class. So it's like I don't want to say IP's version, but it's like, you know, a traditional version of how to use
Yeah.
games to teach children.
So you were starting all the way back then, like you very first sort of began to understand that games were a good way of teaching, all the way back when you were a blue belt teaching random kids at a gym.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You learn quite a bit about kids. And one of the things is kids come to the environment to learn with a completely different framework than adults do. Like kids are mostly there for other kids. Like they do not care about what's going on. They don't care about the adults. They're literally there to play. They're very responsive to their peer group. And that was one of the very first things that I learned in how to organize kids classes, center kids class around kids. And that's something I think a lot of programs fail to do is to truly understand what that means and how kids are perceiving a learning environment relative to their other peers.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. I've seen gyms really try and focus on the technical development of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as a skill. A 6-year-old doesn't care. And I'm telling you, the parent sitting on the mat doesn't care either. Like, And if
For
they
sure.
do, they're probably in the wrong class. They probably need to be doing something a little bit different. And I guess that's where I am such a massive advocate for CLA for kids, because the crossover is just between when I started teaching kids, and it naturally evolved. We knew my partner is a big, like the biggest fan of yours, and did a lot of research looking into you, looking into Rob Gray. I think he's read every book under the sun. And when we decided to open the gym, he was like, this is it. This is how, this is it. This is the way. Well, I can see that this works.
For
And
sure.
he came from a very traditional background. So when we started, I struggled a little bit in the beginning, to be honest. Like, it was very hard for me to find the constraints and to find how to evolve the skill without the kids kind of losing it. And then when I started to think about it a little bit further, I realized it was because I was trying to teach them like adults, even with CLA skill. I was forgetting that a developmental level of a child is so different to an adult, and a 4-year-old doesn't even know how to play a game. Like, they still play next to each other, but they don't understand that two people can have a goal. They're just thinking one thing at a time.
Sure.
And that's when I really started to understand that the language that I was using is so important with kids. But CLA is just such a the ultimate way to teach kids, because it's play and it's fun. Like, adults come to the class because they want to play and have fun with CLA, right? But kids, it's the same thing. They love it.
Yeah.
Um, and so then I started to realize, yeah, this is what we need to do. But there's always that pushback along the way and things like that. But I'd love to then know, why did you stop teaching kids?
Well, that is so why I like teaching kids and why I stopped teaching kids are intimately connected. So one of
Yeah.
the biggest issues with running kids classes or developing a program for children are the parents. The parents often thrust their expectation of what a child is, what a child should do,
Mm,
how they should behave, and they put it not only on the kid, but they put it on the teacher who's teaching the kids, who may or may not be an expert in what they do. So you don't know. I mean, you're going to a mixed bag, but parents are definitely not experts on how kids learn and what kids should be doing. But they all think they are because it's their kid. And
mm,
so I think that's probably one of the most poisonous things to kids program. And in my time teaching kids, that always sat at the center for me and bothered me quite a bit. Um,
mm,
so over the years, when I got my own school and ran my own kids program, I loved it. I had 5 to 7s, I had 8 to 12s. It was my favorite thing to teach because I'd done it for so long, I was so comfortable. But because I focused a lot on competition for my adults and parents got to know my school as a competitive school, they started to bring that attitude here with their children. And the whole thing was I don't teach competitive kids. I don't believe in it. If kids want to go out and compete, that's fun. It should be a fun day where their friends go out, they have matches, they have ice cream afterwards, win, lose, draw, everyone hugs, everyone goes home. And that wasn't what was happening. Parents were wanting their kid to travel and spend all this money, and they're screaming at their kids on the mat. And the kids are stressed and they're crying. And I wanted nothing to do with that. So
mm,
it was actually a young lady in my program who actually was in the adult program who experienced some severe abuse from one of her parents that really that was it for me. Like, it was so severe, I just couldn't really handle it, and I decided during COVID, I'm just not going to restart the kids program. I'm gonna put that to the side for now, and I'm gonna focus on the adults. And so it's like a mix of things, but mostly the poisonous expectations of parents killed it for me.
yeah, I can completely relate to that. And that is, I think, when I put like anything on Instagram, like a poll or something, to look for like, what do you find challenging as a coach? The number one thing is parents. The number one thing is, every time, how do you mitigate the expectations that parents have of how a class should look or how the teaching should occur? And it's kind of like, how, yeah. How can you have that expectation when you don't even train yourself? Actually, I have to say, the parents that train themselves are almost worse, because they have their adult expectation of how jiu-jitsu should look, and
Mhm.
then they push that onto their child. And I think that that's something that's really hard. So did you find a way to try and mitigate that? Or, like,
Yeah,
I know some gyms don't even let parents in the gym. Some parents, like, some gyms do certain things, but I
yeah.
personally don't have an answer.
So there's a couple of things. I mean, I've done something myself, but also one of the best kids coaches in the world is Donald Aiknick, Master Donnie from Lloyd's program. He's been teaching kids his whole life. He has the most comprehensive, connected, healthy kids program I've ever been around. And he actually made parents sign waivers that once they walked through the door, they could not speak to their children unless their child was hurt or something else. Like you couldn't talk to your kids on the mat, you couldn't discipline your kids on the mat, nothing like this. Like once they came in, they could sit there and watch. But if they were going to get noisy and yell at their kids, they had to go out in the car and wait.
Mm.
And because of the environment he's in a little bit of a tough environment. The parent's a little more aggressive than a typical parent. So that was something he had to face a lot. But with developing the appropriate culture and, of course, getting parents to buy in through signing of the waiver seemed to help quite a bit. For me, I had a similar rule. I didn't make my kids program wasn't as large. I only had about 40 kids. So I used to just tell the parents, look, if you speak to them, I'm going to ask you to go outside. So just unless they're hurt, I'll send them to you. You can comfort them. But when they're here, they're learning from me, not you. And that's pretty much it. And that worked relatively well. But it just got too much for me to handle, both developing, building a school, teaching all my classes, developing a competitive adult program, then also developing a healthy kids program. It was just too much. It was too much for me. I couldn't handle it by myself.
Yeah, you can only wear so many hats. And when you're trying to, I think, running a business as well, and that's why I see a lot of, business or gym owners, they kind of give somebody else and they give that blue belt the kids program because they can't handle it themselves, because they're trying to handle the adults and they're trying to handle all these things, and it just becomes it's too much to be able to do.
It's very tough. I wear all my hats here. I literally teach every class. I do all my finance stuff. I do everything. And so after 10 years of doing everything, it's like, man, this is pretty exhausting.
Yeah. Man, after 10 years, I'm exhausted after a year and a half. So well done to getting into 10 years.
Yeah. You're still smiling happy. You're not jaded and cynical yet. So hopefully it doesn't happen to you.
It's actually really funny. We have like a group chat with like different gym owners from everywhere. And someone actually just asked something about parents in this group chat. They were trying to get away with not paying for something like that. And I was like, just let them cancel. And then I wrote afterwards, I'm like, yeah, but I'm probably a bit bitter. So maybe don't take my advice.
No, I think that's good advice, because the parent that you have to cater to like that will always be the parent you have to cater to. What you realize is they're archetypical parents who come in and they're always the same. No, no matter what they look like, no matter what socioeconomic background they come through, there'll be a parent that complains about everything and tries to nickel and dime everything, and there's nothing you can do with that parent. So it's best to cut that off early for your
100%. For your own sanity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, okay, let's talk a little bit more about CLA. So we love it. Honestly, the results that I have seen, more so in my kids than the adults, I find adults are still really looking for an answer. I like to compare, and please correct me if you don't see this comparison at all, but I like to see CLA and IP a little bit like our education system in Australia. I don't know what it's like anywhere else, but in early childhood, you are given play-based learning. You learn in your environment, you have roles, you play, you have these experiences that naturally evolve through your environment. I see that as CLA. Then you get to your primary school, your high school, and you're put at a desk and you've given the information. Yes, you have to use your brain a little bit, but essentially it's like, okay, tell me what I need to know, and then I'll learn that. And that's what happens. And I kind of see that as IP. So then when I see, classes and things like that, I then realized, wow, like, why am I trying to IP my kids in a class? Why am I doing this to them? They're not retaining this information at all. And the way that the kids move is it's spectacular. I've never seen anything like it. Like, they just move in a way that naturally flows because they're not trying to think about this information that they're trying to regurgitate. They're not overthinking their movements. They allow their bodies to flow with creativity. And I think the creativity is the most beautiful part of kids' CLA. I think it's just spectacular. So yeah, I'd love to know, like, do you see that comparison? Like, I don't know.
I actually think it's just a cultural expectation. I think as you age, you have an expectation of an outcome or a finished product most times in your life. Get this thing done, get this job done, produce this outcome. We need it now. And so that's like a pruning effect that happens as you age. You just have to get it done. So knowing where things are, knowing what the answers are, knowing what's good enough, this is just like rife in our culture. And so I think we forget about the general exploratory behavior and play that got us the skills that allow us to, exploit these outcome-driven aspects of our culture as adults, but we forget how we got there, and then we end up just only doing the thing that's expected of us at the end, like get this done, don't explore anymore. We don't have time for general play or general search. We are on a deadline, we're on a timeline, and I think that's what happens. And I think parents then experience that and turn around and just push that back onto their children. And that's why I think we see the cycle of that happening. We often forget what it took to get us to where we are.
Mm.
I think, and again, please, you can look this up and you guys can check me if I'm wrong, but everyone always brings up this the Dunning-Kruger effect. The two researchers who came up with that relationship between ignorance and confidence. So the more ignorant you are of a subject matter, the more confident you feel that you know it. It's inversely related. But there's also a second point to it. Once you become an expert, you forget what it took to become an expert. So your expectation on what a beginner should do relative to you where you are now is messed up. You don't have a clear view of how you are where you are now. And again, I think that those are some of the reasons why we see this with when we transition from childhood to adulthood, and then why we see parents enact that behavior back onto their children.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I have this idea that all the problems we face are cultural problems. So
Yeah.
it's basically these expectations of how we think things should go, or how we want things to go, or how we believe things. But if we just kind of leave things alone and watch them do what they do, things tend to work out better that way, because that's what's always happening all the time.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Absolutely. Mind. Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I take it seriously. If we pick up information from the environment, and it's this
Yeah.
reciprocal relationship between me, the creature, embedded in the environment that created me, there's always this thing going on. And if we're paying attention to it, we'll start to see things that we might not have seen before, that could be more effective ways to go about learning something or understanding something.
Mm. Okay. I'll have to think on that one. That was good. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah. All right. So then, when you were teaching kids and when you were teaching CLA, you had your own gym, and up until 2020, you would had the kids program. How often were your kids training? Because when we look at kids Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and specifically when I'm using, games and CLA to teach my kids, they have that resistance all of the time. And finding that balance for kids between what is 100% resistance and what is zero resistance, I'm still building that.
Okay.
But when they are training, depending on what you're doing, obviously like a closed guard position is going to be a whole lot less work than if you were doing, like, say, wrestling and on your feet and standing. But how do you manage that fatigue? How long are your sessions for? How did you find that you were able to manage the amount of time those kids needed to train?
Okay, so I did a 4-day week schedule, Monday through Thursday. I did
Mm-hmm.
2 gi classes, 2 no gi classes. So my gi classes were Monday, Wednesday. My no gi classes were Tuesday, Thursday. Now, the first reason I situated it like that is for variation. I wanted kids to have a complete grappling experience. I want them to like tug on cloth and move players around by their jacket and their pants, like use the cloth. And the no gi, I wanted them to learn how to grab bodies. So I really thought about the variable experience for children, because that's what research shows is to help them as they grow. The more variable their early athletic experiences are, the more adaptable and flexible as movers they become as they age. So I really wanted to try to enhance that. So 4 days a week, 2 gi, 2 no gi. As far as fatigue goes, for children, I mostly paid attention to mental fatigue. So they're not producing forces that are very physically demanding on their body unless they have crazy parents who are making them do sprints and push-ups and things like that. Kids at play are just kids at play. They're not being intense psychologically, therefore they can't physically produce high levels of intensity. So for me, it was just how much mental fatigue were they experiencing? Did they want to be there? Were they tired from school? Blah, blah, blah. So I kept my 5 to 7s 30 minutes. So my 5 to 7s was 30 minutes, and my 8 to 12 was 45 minutes. Very short classes. Now, because we are doing live work the whole time, we can really maximize that time. Kids don't need much more. You probably notice now that after 25 minutes, you lose them. They start talking more to each other. They start wanting to play games. They start asking more questions. They start wanting more water breaks. They're telling you they're tired.
Yeah.
They don't want to engage anymore, and that's okay. Last thing I'm going to say, and I'll shut up. We put these artificial time constraints on what we think a training block should be. Like, why 30 minutes? Why 45? Why an hour? Why? Nobody ever asked that question. So, but luckily, there's researchers who looked into it, and they find that people generally have a 25-minute to a 2-hour ability to focus hard on a subject, depending on the physical demands of the subject.
Yeah, that's really interesting because yeah, my classes are the same. I used to have a two to threes. I was doing two to threes. It was, I loved it, actually. I loved it. But it wasn't like the way that, and I explained this to parents all the time. I'm like, this is not going to look the way that you think this is going to look. It's going to be the most simple foundational movements for the body. It's not even going to be a game because they can't play a game together. They have no idea how yet.
Yeah.
Um, and so anyway, I have taken a little hiatus from that one. I needed a bit of a break, but we have like a four to fives, a six to nines, and a nine to 14s. And that 9-year-old kind of crosses over depending on how big they are. And the same
I actually
thing.
I like your divisions there. Those are good.
Yeah. And they were based again on the developmental age range of how children play and how their
Beautiful.
brain develops. So that then that way I knew that, if I'm putting a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, first of all, that 8-year-old, if they see that 5-year-old in the class, they're probably, it's a bit kiddish, it's a bit less engaging for them. And when you're doing like your games and your constraints and things, it's much harder to be able to get the outcome that we're looking for when you've got two kids that are just completely mismatched. But life happens and it's hard. But that was where I went with those. And the same thing with the time. After 30 minutes in a four to fives class, that's it. They don't need anything more than that. They can't focus. And I think that that's something that I try to tell people is like, what is it? And I imagine it's similar with it because my education background, yours is a lot more sports, like, what is it, two to threes? It's like 2 to 3 minutes per age for focus. So if you are 5, you have 2 to 3 times their age. That's it. That's the whole amount of focus that you can have. So if a child's 5, you have the maximum 12 minutes. So then you can't do a 12-minute jiu-jitsu session. Like, that's not going to work. So then you spread it out and you make it fun and you do all those things. That's where you get the 30 minutes from. But
Yeah.
mine was the same. That's why I spread it exactly the same time amount. But it wasn't based on anything other than, gosh, it's been 25 minutes and you guys can't sit still. You must be had enough. You're tired. It's mental. It's done.
Truly,
Yeah.
truly. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that's another thing too is it's hard to teach people what the signals that children are giving you are. So because they're different. When a kid whines and cries and throws himself around or asks more questions, these are signs that you have to learn how to read. Like, what does this mean for the child? What are they experiencing? You know what I mean? Why are they throwing a temper tantrum? Why are they being obstinate? And it's largely due to either like fatigue or confusion or just lack of desire to engage in the subject. And so trying to understand and orient your program around these signals, I think is critical for, healthy child development,
Yeah, definitely. Or it's a windy day. Did you have the windy day experience?
No, what's the
When
windy day?
I don't know, whenever it's a windy day, I just forget about everything. Windy day or full moons. Full moons do it too. If it's a windy day or a full moon, those kids come in and I look at them and I'm like, yeah, it's going to be one of those days. Let's start with some big movements, hey, because there's no point in me getting you guys to sit down. And that's it, being adaptable. That's the number
Oh,
one thing. Coaching in general. I mean, I don't coach our adults, but being able to be adaptable to your environment and to any person that walks in your door, I think is so important.
well, that's really what we're doing. I mean, that's the demand of our job.
Mm.
Our demand of our job is not to be a lecturer, not to be an accountability buddy. It's literally to design a practice that's going to be relevant to whoever's taking it and being able to adapt as things change, either that day, that week, or that month. And being sensitive to those changes is really the center of our job.
Definitely. So then I have lots of kids in the class. Say I have a kid, and I know that other people must experience this too. I have a kid that comes in and, we set up our games, for our constraints. And what happens when they don't win? Because, yeah, adults have this problem too, and that's when egos really start to play out. And we found that a lot in the beginning, with the level of intensity that they would train at, because they were just thinking about winning. They weren't focused on an intention. They weren't trying to do anything other than win. But kids, it hurts more
Yeah.
because they need to win. And it doesn't matter if I set like, okay, we're going to play, say, dirty feet. I use dirty feet all the time. Just trying to get past the legs and get chest to chest connection. But your partner has really dirty feet and you want to keep your really dirty feet on your partner all the time. And so then only one person can win that. And it doesn't matter if I make that explicitly clear that the person on the top is going to pass your legs and get chest to chest. There is still going to be at least one or two kids in the class that will just absolutely lose it. And how do you deal with that? How do you manage that?
I have two minds of it. So one is I love watching children play because they're learning how to be social. They're learning how to deal with the emotions of winning and losing and pain and embarrassment and being watched and looked at and judged. They need to go through it. But so I typically let it happen, but I build a culture of positivity around the experience. So for example, I never use any punishment or any discipline measures. None. I didn't do that. The other thing is we praise failure. So let's imagine they play a game. As soon as somebody wins or it's over, we get excited. Oh, you guys did amazing. High five each other. Oh, that was so great. Switch. And so win, lose, or draw, you're high fiving each other. You're giving each other hugs. You're celebrating what each other did well. Talk publicly about what each child did. Like, let's say the bottom child, you lasted 2 minutes by using your dirty feet. That was amazing. Praise them for the experience they're having, and they'll start seeing those little victories themselves, and they'll even start cheering themselves on. And you can build this into the culture. So again, high support, high praise for action, high praise for failure, high-fiving each other. The kids will tease each other. I won. And then you're like, well, maybe not next time. You try to, find a way to kind of take them off their horse a little bit without highlighting the kid who just lost. But these are some cultural things that I did historically.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. That's good because that's very similar to what we do. But, there is always that one that's like, I won. And it's like, okay, yeah, you did. But did you see what your other friend was able to do? Did you see how but they were able to last a bit longer this time, whatever it is. But I tell you what, some days I'm like, yeah, okay, you won. Like, move on. But obviously we don't say that.
So I used to like to get involved. So let's say, for example, I had one of those kids, right? Then I'd be like, all right, me and you were playing. And then I'd win the game, like, oh, I won. I'd start dancing around and be like, I won. You know what I mean? And just giving them a little background medicine. But of course, since I'm an adult, it doesn't seem as punishing. I'm being playful. And I think that's helped me historically. But again, you will have kids that's just who they are, and you can't erase it. It's just to find a way to let it exist in that room where it's not hurting the other kid's feelings or even that kid alienating himself. Because sometimes kids will respond negatively to people like that, and other kids won't want to play with him or her. So trying to find a way to either ignore it, get yourself involved, and tease them back, but try to find a way to make it workable. And sometimes just ignoring it outright works very well too, like just letting it exist and never commenting on it.
Yeah, that's a good idea too. Just letting it be.
Yeah. And we have to try, I think the goal is not to have one answer, it's to try all these different measures, but truly looking at it through the lens of they are learning how to be human. They are learning the limits of their emotional reaching out of the world and who they are and what their identity is, this feeling of victory and defeat. They're experiencing that for the first time. You know what I mean? Then they have no idea what it is. And so letting it exist in a healthy way, I think, is important.
Absolutely. Yeah, fantastic. So then when you're teaching your class and you're teaching kids and you're setting up your games or you're setting up your structures and things like that, like I know how you sort of generally run your adults and things like that, and I understand how I think you mentioned possibly in your last one with Dylan about doing the same thing 4 days a week or 3 days a week or something. 3 days. Yeah, that's right. Because you offer your program 4 days. So you would do the same thing. And you would offer that the same exact class with slightly different focuses or talk me through that.
I think it was, so I've been trying to think about where I got the Blue's Clues idea from because I read it so long ago. And when I went down the rabbit hole, learning about kids shows and kids attention and attentional focus groups, I think it was Tipping Point. I'm pretty sure. I think someone commented in the section that's where I heard about that. But the idea is really, so I'm sorry, I got sidetracked for a second. You asked me how I organize my kids' classes. So
Yes.
the first thing I do with the first game is I start to build an expectation. And so that's what I learned about. I learned about Blue Clues really is building an expectation for what's going to happen in the class, both for the day and for the week. This expectation gives students like boundaries or rails to operate within that gives them a sense of certainty and connection to what they're doing. So every game, the first thing we did is get kids interacting with each other, for listening and following directions. So we play like follow the leader, match your partner. We play, chaos reset games, things where they had to respond to like talking and calling and listening before we did anything else. So that was always the first thing we did every day. Even so to get the expectation for listening and following directions and paying attention, doing what you were told. And again, we would do this 3 days a week. And on the fourth day, it would just be chaos. We'd be like, all right, guys, we're starting on a single A game today. And it would just be totally random just to make it exciting. But I used to practice doing these things verbatim. So even my speeches, even the things I would say were identical for 3 days.
Mm.
And then what was really cool is the kids would engage with me more the more I did that. They're like, I know what you're going to say next. I know what you're going to say next. I was like, what am I going to say next? Like, we're going to play this game today. I was like, how did you know? And they're all excited because they figured out, they read my mind and they knew what we were playing. And I noticed that engagement went up. So, and it was exactly what the research suggested that would happen. Like I watched it happen right there in front of my eyes. So
Yeah.
it was very, very cool. But yeah, so the 3 days were the same, identical. Every game was the same. Every speech was the same. The order of the class was the same. And that fourth day, I shook things up. It was different. Maybe we played dodgeball first, or we'd play the sumo game first. It would be
Mm.
random. And I'd let them have more fun. I'd let them break out into chaos a little bit more. I wouldn't be so strict on them on the fourth day.
You just said something there that made me think that you played dodgeball. So I'm curious because this is something again that I see, particularly in an IP class, is because you are having to focus for such longer periods of time on things that are really quite challenging for kids, that then a lot of the filled in time was games of whatever it is, red light, green light, dodgeball, bull rush, whatever it was. You still incorporated those.
Yeah. So the first game was all about focus. So we like matched each other, mocked each other, mimicked each other. We listened. They had to respond to commands, stuff like that. That was always the first game, and it would last about 5 to 10 minutes depending on the day. Because with explanations, water breaks, things like that. So basically about 5 minutes. And then the last class was always a game that just kids like to play, like anything kids like to do, tag, dodgeball. And it was the last 5 minutes. Like that was the candy that they got. But the middle chunk was the 20 minutes was all jujitsu. So again, first 5 listening games, last 5 fun kids games, but that middle was the 20 minutes of hard jujitsu focus. And so again, start off with the expectation of listening, ended with the expectation of fun, did jujitsu in the middle. It just seemed to sandwich things together, keeping the kids locked in, focused on what they were doing, but also looking forward to the end of class because they got to do what kids do. What they came to do is play with their friends. So
Yeah. And it's at that expectation too. Like if they know that that first 5 minutes and that last 5 minutes is always, well, even the middle part is always going to be the same. That's that predictability, I suppose. So then they know what to look forward to. It's creating a safe space for them that they can, they know what to expect from you. It doesn't change. The games change, but the expectation doesn't.
sure, exactly right. And yeah, having those nice set boundaries just work really, really well. Yeah,
Mm.
I think you're right. A lot of kids classes they incorporate random acts like dodgeball and shit to take up time. But I did it purposefully. Like I knew
Yeah.
why we played that at the end. It wasn't random. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It was. And what's really interesting is kids would remember that. Like they would come in the next day and be like, if we listened really well today, can we play dodgeball at the end of class? You know what I mean? It's like they came in thinking about that. And then when they would play it, they would remember, oh, I'm going to get you because you got me yesterday. And I just
Yeah.
love that. Like their desire to come to do jujitsu, even though it might have been based on playing dodgeball, it got them here in the room to start developing. So,
Yes, I'd love to know. So when we've been trialing certain different ways of setting up our classes in terms of, do we do like a month of one thing? Do we do 2 weeks of one thing? Do we try and incorporate all aspects of the game in one class? Well, obviously with flexibility, like you start standing, let's do some pinning, let's do like submission. How did you do it?
yeah, same way. So I do it exactly like I do with my adults. We did standing stuff, guarded stuff, pinning stuff, and submission stuff. Like every single day. And
Yeah.
what we'd focus on, we would build week to week. So the games would just be subtle. So let's imagine 1 week for the first game, we're starting off on single leg attachment, right? So you're trying to use the single leg to even just keep a hold of it. And so you're doing that for 3 days, and then fourth day we do something different with it. And then next week we'd do single leg again, but maybe we'd be focus on getting it. Or maybe we would focus on starting underneath our partner, trying to stand up with it. So it would be around grabbing one or two legs, and we just keep going on week to week to week to week to week. So the way that I think about it is extending the experience for a month. So let's say, again, single leg stuff and as many different ways you can orient it for a month. And then switch it. Then maybe it's double legs, going from one leg to two legs. So it really doesn't matter. You're just building in the experience that they're ultimately going to use to play the game. So it's going to really be up to you as a coach what you want to see your kids perform. What do you want to see them go towards? But again, I do something from standing, something from guard, something from pin, something from submission. And each week I just grew on or built onto what I'd done in the previous by making slight subtle changes.
Yeah. Yeah. So then submissions.
Yes.
This is probably the thing that I have gotten the most feedback from parents that felt like their child wasn't getting the submission as well as they could because it wasn't explicitly instructed. And I was like, yeah, cool, but can your kid hold someone down long enough to even get the submission? Probably not. So let's work on that first. But understanding that, and so how do you evolve that submission?
Okay, so
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I thought the question was done.
Go.
So submissions and pinning to me are the same thing because the submissions are all about immobilization. So you can only break somebody relative to how still you can hold them. So for kids, we use submissions as pinning games. So let's say, for example, we're starting an arm lock breaking position. Kids first just learn how to stay on the arm and hold the other kid down and not let the arm come out. If they do a head and arm game, they're trying to just hold their kid trapped there for extended periods of time. Now, the kid does have the option to tap if they get uncomfortable, they can't breathe. That's totally fine. But the goal is not to squeeze. The goal is to hold. Same thing with figure four grips. You give them a figure four grip, and their job is to hold their partner down with it or stay attached and follow them around. So it's all about maintaining the attachment that's going to lead to the submission. So do we attach, again, submission threat, that is the breaking point, with immobilization. And we always pair those two things together. When we were initially teaching what a submission was for a specific type of submission.
Yeah. And so then when you got to the point where we do the same thing, and I'm pretty sure that's probably because we got it from you. When we do the end of the submission. So say, when you teach adults, it's different. They kind of can gauge when to tap. But for kids, they sometimes are a bit more hypermobile. They don't necessarily know when to tap. And when they go into a comp or something, you know that a ref is going to stop it when they see it anyway. But how do you then get them to understand when is the time for them to tap?
So through exposure. You got to expose them to pressure, but we have to do it with eyes on them. We can't let them be at one group or two groups be off in the corner. So typically you would need more coaches to do this. Anytime that I would do like finishing submissions, typically what I do is have like two groups in the middle, and me and my assistant coach would watch them. The other kids would wait on the outside. And it would be short, like 2-3 minute goes. So once those kids were done, they were out and it was their turn to watch. And how I got them engaged was when they were watching, they were cheerleaders. So you had to cheer and like tell your friends what to do, and as they were playing. So you kept all the kids involved, but only two groups were going at a time because I didn't have enough coaches have eyes on them, and I wanted them to be able to reach the breaking point without experiencing the injury. And so that's the way I did it. I basically put two groups in the middle. My other coach watched, and we would stop them if it looked dangerous. We'd high five each other, give each other hugs, cheer. Next group in, let's keep playing, and that's what we would do.
Cool. So then you spoke about coach ratio. Essentially, there is, we have found, because you're using resistance with things. Honestly, it is. Sometimes I think it is actually just easier to teach an IP class because, you can drill, you can roll around on the floor, you can do what you like, and I don't have to worry that much. But when you're teaching something like submissions or some of the positions that we put kids in, you really do have to have a higher child to coach ratio. And what was your kind of the ratio that you had, not necessarily with submissions, but like any kind of game. I know we have our own, but I'd be interested to know how many eyes could you have on how many groups?
So I had myself, little Alex, and this kid at the time named Jail, who used to help me with the kids program. He was a teenager. He's 14, 15, 16. He was here with me for a few years. But that was when I had my school. But before that, I always had assistants. I always took other kids, other students, and I had them help me. So I typically had me to four coach or up to four coaches on the mat at a given time. And I would give each coach a group, or I would have them walk around amongst the groups. But yeah, I would say like, you know, if you could have a coach to every 4 to 6 kids would probably be good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You could have your eyes on little groups like that, no problem. Now, and again, I don't want to say this and have people interpret it wrong, but kids are more robust than we realize. Like I never, in the whole entire time I taught kids, had another kid hurt another kid, other than they bumped heads and they're like, ah, and they hurt their teeth, or like someone's finger went in their eye, or got kicked in
Yeah.
the groin or something like that. But I've never had any like catastrophic kids injuries ever. No breaks, no tears, nothing.
Yeah. We're the same. I mean, the head bumps is massive. As soon as you're going to play any kind of standing game, I'm like, all right, guys, also don't headbutt each other. And I
Yeah,
guarantee someone will headbutt them every single class. But like, there's
yeah.
no massive injury. And I think that that's something that needs to be considered too. It's like, yes, you're using resistance, but it doesn't mean that it's not constrained. It's not like it's just absolute chaos and kids are breaking each other's arms.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, especially when
Yeah.
you do like when you first do the single leg game and they both go to pick it at the same time and bonk. That's a regular occurrence. So,
Yeah. Which then goes into like, then they cry. What did you do? What do you do when someone cries?
oh, I'd say, hey, why don't you guys take a break, get some water, and come right back. We'll talk when you guys are done. So you kind of be light about it, give them a small break, let them handle their emotions. You know, some kids would look to their parents. Now I was taught not to let the kids go to their parents, but it just worked better for me. I mean, hey, go give your mom a hug and then come right back, okay? Like just to help ease some of that emotional tension. So that's all. Like water, take a quick break. Go sit there, cry for a minute. It's totally okay, but come back in when you're ready. You know, try to keep it positive. Don't focus on it too hard. Give them a moment, and they'll be fine. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think and I make posts about that too, about, what do you do when someone cries? And there's always a couple on there that are like, they're not allowed to cry on my mats and they're not allowed. I'm like, oh my God, please. They're just
Well,
little.
people are ignorant. I'm sorry. I get really sensitive around. I have this. I'm very sensitive to children. Like
Mm,
I don't know what it is. Like my whole life, I grew up in a lot. I had 13 cousins. I had little kids around me all the time. So it's just something. I'm just very sensitive to their moods. To me, they're like these perfect little humans that are experiencing the world for the first time, and they're having all this crazy shit happen to them. I think we should have more empathy and sympathy for their experiences, and not try to like just jam them into this adulthood so early. I think give them some space and some heart. You know what I mean? Like they'll be tough if
yeah.
they're tough, and if they're not, they won't. And but it should be up to them.
Let them play.
Yeah, let them play.
Yeah. So I guess probably I'm going to keep you all day. But one of my last ones that I wanted to touch on was like, you spoke a bit about competition
Yes.
and the idea of, I guess, yeah, reminding them that they're kids. Did you have many kids competing? How did you navigate that with? Because
No.
we have a lot of kids that would like to compete, and I've even had pushback from parents where I've said no, just because I don't want them to go into an experience that they're not prepared for. Because kids are savages in competition these days, and it's really
Really.
scary.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you're going to do it, I think the way I would redo it all over again is make it a day. So it's a fun day where you go with your friends and your parents and maybe do something fun afterwards where everyone gets to meet up at like a popular place to eat or like a ball pit or a pool. So it seems more like a social event than a stressful thing. It's funny because DeAndre and Gavin, two of my black belts who came to me as black belts from another school, they trained since they were 13 and 9. So D started when he was 13 and Gavin started when he was 9. And they're 4 years apart. And when they would go together, D used to say, man, because D was a very serious teenager. And at 13, 14, all he wanted to do was be good. But Gavin just wanted to go play in the pool with his buddies. And so that was his Gavin didn't care if he was competing. But yeah, I'll compete. But as long as he got to do the kid stuff, he had no problem with it. And
Mm,
D talks about that all the time, and I think that's interesting. So if you can encourage like the play around the tournament, I think you could probably get more buy-in. You get healthier buy-in. It's not so stressful. It seems like fun. And then if you want to have a competitive kids program, I think, if it's kind of like that, I think it's healthy.
Yeah. So then I guess finally you do now have a kids program. It's not yours.
Yeah.
You're not running it. You're not in there.
No,
How do you oversee that? And how do you see Noah and is it Sid? Noah and Sid.
yeah, no one's, yeah, no
Yeah,
one's
yeah.
said. Um,
How do you see them going with this?
so they're both 19 and they
Yeah.
want a life in the sport. And so I'm trying to start them off like I was started off, except a lot easier. So I was just given like an hourly rate to teach kids. I'm actually giving them 80% of the profits. So they can split 80% of what they can build the kids program, make as much money as they want, but it has to be theirs. I take
Yeah.
20 for the gym, the rest they get to split. I want nothing to do with it. The only thing that I do is I look in occasionally to make sure it's fun. The kids are having fun. Noah's they're being excited. They're being loud. They're communicating well with the parents. Just that the back end is running and that it's safe and healthy. And then I let them figure it out. Like,
Mm.
I had to correct Noah last week. I was like, your explanations are too long. The kids aren't listening to you. They're not adults, you know? And I gave an example of how we can use analogy to get to the kids. And so the whole thing was arm locks. So, for the arm lock, when you start under both elbows and you have to get to arm lock breaking position, the whole thing was like, do you know what do crabs have on their hands? What do crabs have on their hands? Oh, pinchers. Our legs are just like the crab's pinchers. We're going to use our legs to pinch in both of their arms. Whoever pinches both of their arms in between their pinchers wins. Like rather than Noah's being okay, we have to stand to the elbows, we have to cover the head. I'm like, no, no, no. Like, the
Yeah.
5-year-old does not hear anything you're saying.
Yeah, I think that is the biggest thing that I'm advocating for in terms of just coaches coaching is kids have absolutely no idea what you are talking about when you use adult language. No idea.
Zero.
But if you could, like, even chest to chest connection, the only reason they know that is because we've developed the ability for them to know that. But if I said, get your tummy on another kid's tummy, okay. If I said, like, just squish them, okay, they can squish them.
100%.
Don't overcomplicate it for yourself. It almost makes it harder because they're going to look at you and be like, what's a figure four? Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't need to be like that. So it's really cool to see you then talking about like little pinches and things like that because the analogies is the way I think that kids get it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, so there were two things I did quite a bit. So, like when I looked through your program, that was one thing I loved. Your massive use of analogies throughout the entire thing. It makes it more interesting. It makes it more fun. That's how kids are thinking anyway. So it really gets them bought into what's happening. It feels the story behind it is more
Mm,
exciting than just grappling. So I use analogies as well. But the other thing that I did is just use simplicity. Like a single leg game was a single leg game. The double leg game was the double leg game. The front headlock game was the front headlock game. I just showed it like you're grabbing your partner's head in the front. Everything was very simple. Even if I did use jiu-jitsu language, nothing was explained. It was just, this is what we call it. The sumo game was the sumo game. The lifting game was the lifting game. Just real simple stuff. If I didn't have an analogy to use, and that
yeah.
worked perfectly fine. As long as you gave them visual representation, and it was simple, they would do it right away. And I actually used the winning to make corrections. So let's say, for example, we were playing the single leg game, and the kids were all standing up straight and both grabbing at each other's knees, and I needed lowness. We'd be like, okay, we'll play the single leg game again, guys. But this time, if you really want to win, you have to get as low as you can. Winners get low, right? If you want to win, you got to get low. But if you stand up, I don't know if you're going to win. And just kind of, use the lowness as a winning criteria. And then kids are all of a sudden in wrestling stances and getting as low as they can before they try to grab the leg. So that worked pretty
Yeah.
well too.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I don't even have, I have so many things I could keep you all day, but I really, really enjoyed chatting to you just about everything with kids. I think that, kids are the future of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I would love to see, I'd love to see more people embrace games and CLA as, there's this big polarizing thing for it. But honestly, if they just gave it a chance, I think people would really start to see a lot more progress and a lot more fun in their kids' class. I think that is the biggest thing, just so much more fun.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
kids are primed to explore. They're already doing it. Kids are
yeah.
right now having their first experiences in the real world. All those initial experiences are going to affect them later as an adult. So we want to make them safe, happy, healthy, and variable, because
Mm.
that's what's going to build the system ultimately to exploit when they decide to choose their sport as teenagers. So giving this wide, happy, varied experience, I think, is what our responsibility as coaches are. The worst myth is that there's a such thing as an elite child. There's no such thing as an elite child. There's a graveyard of kids who got good early and burnt out. I mean, there are more of those than the other. And so I think we should really take that into account when designing these programs. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
I just,
that was
I would love.
absolute gold right there. That is that the whole idea of an elite child, the whole idea of, athletes at 6 years old. I mean, if that, great. If that's what you want to do, go for it. I'm not one to judge, but understand that they're missing the opportunity to be a kid and you're going to burn them out.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
what they don't realize, that's going to affect them because
Yeah.
they're having that experience, and they feel the pressure, even though they're kids, they're feeling it, and then when their hormones kick in, they're 15, 16, they get a girlfriend, boyfriend for the first time, all of a sudden that stress doesn't feel as important to them as this new thing that they're doing. And if they don't have a good way to associate with that, you're going to lose them.
Mm.
I don't know. I don't think it's ultimately healthy, really. I think for kids, lots of variation, lots of different sports when they're young. They should choose their sport 13, 14, 15, and then we can start getting serious with them. Because
Yeah.
now they're in their adult bodies, they're producing adult hormones. That's the state they're going to live in for the majority of their competitive career. So I think that's when the true focus starts. But any earlier than that, I think just really ruins the physiology and the psychology of the child.
Yeah. That was perfect. Let's end it there because that sums it up to a T. Absolutely. Greg, thank you so much for chatting with me. I really, really appreciate your time. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you for, yeah, the way that you've inspired our entire program has been, phenomenal. And I mean, not just you and yourself, but, the whole CLA approach and the whole eco thing comes with its challenges, of course, but we just don't see it being any other way.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And before we end it, I just want to say something to you. Is I look at a lot of different kids programs, look at a lot of people involved in this space. And I'm not saying this on the phone now. Actually, what encouraged me to reach out to you was the quality of the program you were offering. With only a year and a half of teaching and studying, even being new to the sport of jiu-jitsu yourself, being only a blue belt, you really took the role of a coach seriously. And I think that the way you oriented around kids takes a lot into what being a kid took a lot into account as to what motivates children to be children, ultimately learn. And I think the way you're structuring the program is truly fantastic. And I hope you get more notoriety, because I went and looked through your pages and there's not enough likes, there's not enough shares. You need more, because I think that a lot of people learn from what you've already done so early in your development. So, congrats to you.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that. Thank you.